The following is from one of the talks given by Gurdjieff in Bennett, and it's one of his public talks or public lectures on Gurdjieff. I'm reading it from the Lectures on Gurdjieff, 14 Public Lectures, 1949 to 1973. So this is just an extract. Gurdjieff taught that man is a being with two destinies, one unavoidable, the other which it is in his power to have, but only if he himself earns it. And this second destiny, both as regards this life and any possibilities of another life, is incomparably more valuable than the first. As things are in the world at the present time, a very small proportion of people are doing anything effective for the attainment of the second destiny. This has certain very bad consequences, because the amount of this energy or matter which has to be produced in the life of man is determined not by himself, but by general influences. Suppose that we had a flock of sheep and required so much wool. If the sheep began to produce less wool, we should have to increase our flock. The population of the world is increased in very much the same way as the number of sheep that have to be kept as the wool deteriorates in quality and quantity, and this carries with it very unsatisfactory consequences for mankind. If what I've been saying is right, if it is in fact important to us individually and important to our race as a whole and to higher purposes also, that a sufficiently large number of people should struggle for the attainment of the second destiny, for living in the second world, then how is the necessity for this to be more widely felt? If it can be more widely felt, then future generations will enter into a new world. If not, they will not even keep the old world that we have known. It is about the answer to that question that I'm going to speak in the next 3 lectures. It may help you to understand something of the significance of these ideas for the future of mankind, if we try to visualize the effect on human relationships of a widespread realization that a man who does not struggle to attain a high destiny is no more than an animal, and indeed to be despised, which an animal is not. This is as far removed as possible from current ways of looking at people. They are valued for what they have, whether personal attractions or material possessions, for the position they occupy in life, and for similar factors which may have no connection at all with any true value. If once it is understood that the one true criterion which objectively decides the value of a man is his abilities to struggle with himself, then only those would be respected who showed by their lives that they had achieved some measure of success in this direction. Their advice and help would be sought after as people who had to some extent free themselves from the mechanicalness of ordinary existence, from slavery to external things, from inner weaknesses. Ambition, the desire for power, fame, admiration, and the other motives which lead people to work and strive for positions of authority would be seen as defects and weaknesses unworthy of a true man. The world would seek for teachers rather than rulers, for those who could set an example rather than those who dominate and impress. The idea of a ruler who is himself the helpless slave of his own passions and his own automatism would be seen for what it is, a ludicrous travesty of a true master of men. A further inevitable consequence would be the disappearance of the mutual mis-evaluation among different castes or classes and between nations and races. Such mis-evaluation is only possible so long as artificial values dominate the mind of man. Wars of aggression and conquest, ideological and religious wars, all have their origin in false conceptions of what is important for man. It will be by no means obvious to you if I say that only an understanding of the twofold destiny of man can put an end to war. I propose, therefore, to finish this lecture by saying a little about Gurdjieff's teaching on the subject of war, its origin, and the possibility of its ceasing. Our attitude towards war is altogether false. We tend, as a matter of course, to regard war as the result of the intentional action of some wicked man or group of men, or of some nation with a lust for conquest and power. Wars appear to both sides engaged in them as defence against some aggression, or as necessary for the furthering of some worthy or even sacred cause. Even those who most detest war and are prepared to sacrifice their liberty or even their lives to save themselves from becoming involved in it, conceive it as a wicked action deliberately undertaken. In reality, war is not like this at all. It is a terrible madness which overtakes mankind when people lose even the little sense of reality they usually have. War is the supreme manifestation of human helplessness. This applies to all forms of mutual destruction, whether revolution and civil war within a nation, or armed conflict between nations and the peoples of the world. War has a twofold origin. The first is outside of man and arises independently. The second is within man and is due to his own weakness and failure. From time to time, a special state of tension arises on the earth, which Gurdjieff calls the state of Solioonensius. This state of tension arises from the relations between the planets. I do not mean by this that it is something supernatural or mysterious. It is a perfectly natural process connected with the changes in the balance of electrical and other energy in the solar system. For example, it is already suspected by science that the occurrence of sunspots has an effect upon the human psyche. It may help you to understand what I mean by calling Solioonensius a perfectly natural process, if you consider a simple phenomenon well known to all. I refer to the effect in Great Britain of the east wind, or in the Mediterranean of the Sirocco. When the east wind blows, people become irritable and nothing seems to go right. I once became interested in this because I wanted to see whether it was a real or an imaginary effect. I asked a number of people to observe carefully and let me know as objectively as possible whether they could detect a state of inner tension caused by the east wind. Nearly everyone confirmed that a state of irritability did, in fact, arise in them even before they were aware that the east wind was blowing. In a subtler and pervasive manner, great regions of the earth's surface, and sometimes even the whole of the earth, become subject to a state of tension which produces in people a strong sense of dissatisfaction with their conditions of life. They become irritable or aggressive, apprehensive, nervous and highly suggestible. Gurdjieff said that knowledge of Solioonensius existed thousands of years ago, and that he took the term from a very ancient tradition. At the present time, its significance has been forgotten or lost. The point is that there are two completely different ways in which people can react to a state of Solioonensius. It always arouses dissatisfaction, but this may be external or internal. External dissatisfaction leads to external conflict. Internal dissatisfaction strengthens the desire to struggle with oneself. Those who understand the necessity for working on themselves and achieving the second destiny find in that state of tension the greatest possibility of incentive and force to make them work harder. But those who do not have this feeling, this realization, project outwards their dissatisfaction and become hostile and angry with other people, suspicious, jealous and the rest of it. And then, defenseless against these mass psychoses, begin to hate. And the very people who, only a few years before, could not conceive of themselves consenting to the idea of war, become involved in the destruction of other people. And these other people, passing through the same mass psychosis with the same justification, wish in turn to destroy their existence. It is possible, by careful study of history and of various psychological processes, to verify this. And once you understand it, you will see that there is no way by which war can be stopped other than by making people understand the necessity for this work. Otherwise they have no defence against this state of tension, no contrivances, no organisation, no good resolutions can avail, because there is a physico-chemical process involved. This state of tension must produce this result. We do not know when such a state of tension will come over the world again. When it is absent, we do not feel war as something possible, but when it approaches, nothing can be done unless an idea can come into the world which can act on a sufficiently large number of people to enable them to turn this force in a different direction. This is one reason why the change, the transition period from one epoch to another, from one world to another, is a dangerous period. Old ideas have lost their momentum and can no longer move the world. New ideas have not yet gained momentum. All through history, and even before the beginning of history, we find such periods accompanied by war and revolution, not because war and revolution are inevitable in themselves, but because people have lacked that discrimination which would enable them to use this situation rightly. If we are able to go into a world in which this is understood, then the course of history can be different, because the destiny of all mankind can be raised to a higher level. There is no higher purpose in the life of man than to bring about this great transition. If a new world is to come, we must first create it in ourselves. You may ask how the work of a few people can change the world. It has always been so. Ideas are powerful, not organisations. Nothing can be done by outward force. Everything can be done by inner strength. Let me try to give you a picture of how such changes can come. Some of you no doubt are cooks and have had to make sauces. Suppose I am making some sauce like a hollandaise, which is liable to demulsify, that is, the butter separates from the egg. This can be a terrifying experience if you are making a sauce for 60 or 70 people with pounds of butter and dozens of eggs. An inexperienced cook loses his head and beats the sauce violently, but only makes things worse. A good cook pours a little water at one edge of the bowl and stirs quietly until it turns back again, and then it spreads through the whole mass until the sauce is right again. The first time you do this, it seems almost miraculous. It is the same with the world. Everywhere people are stirring violently to get oil and water to mix. This cannot happen. The part of wisdom is to establish, here and there, centres in which right relationships can exist by the power of a common understanding of what is ultimately important. From such centres there can spread throughout the world, perhaps far more quickly than you might imagine possible, the seeds of a new world. This reading was from J.G. Bennett's Lectures on Gurdjieff, available as e-books and paperbacks, such like. Thank you for listening, and thank you to J.G. Bennett for his work.